everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for the introduction, Erin. I am so happy to be here today to talk in this fireside chat with two great colleagues. So today joining me, I have Dorothy Jones-Davis, and she's the Executive Director for the Nation of Makers. Thanks for joining, Dorothy. And then I also have Kipp Bradford, and he is the CTO for Treau, as well as a founding board member for the Nation of Makers. And I have a pleasure of working with both of these folks because, as Erin mentioned, I'm leading the American Made Challenges prize platform and program with the Department of Energy, and the Nation of Makers is a big component of that. So the Nation of Makers is what we call a power connector in that organization, in that program. And they are working with us on a daily basis, working with all of the different teams that we have competing in the prize competitions. So hopefully some of our viewers know about the American Made Challenges. But right now we have two big prizes going on. Well, we have a lot of prizes going on, but we have the solar prize that the Nation of Makers is really involved in, as well as the geothermal prize. We have a bunch of water prizes out there as well. So if you haven't heard about it, please go to our website, americanmadechallenges.org, to learn more. But today we want to dive into this discussion about diversity and what really makes diversity important for innovation, especially in the energy arena. So before we dive into that conversation, I'd like to turn it over. I'll go with you first, Dorothy, since you're on the top of my screen. And you could just give yourself a little bit more of an introduction here to the audience.
Okay, again, my name is Dorothy Jones-Davis, and I'm the Executive Director of Nation of Makers. And our organization is close to 4 years young. We're an organization that serves as an association of sorts for maker organizations. And makers are individuals that create and innovate in a number of different sectors to either produce products, to innovate for fun and hobby, or to just have impacts in so many different fields, everything from education to workforce development, to defense and security, and so much more. And really our organization does a number of things, but really serves to support those organizations through community building, resource sharing, and advocacy. Really trying to bolster the American innovation ecosystem, and really trying to make sure that all of our makers across the country are supported in the work that they do. Thank you. And I guess I'll turn it over to Kipp to tell us a little bit more about Treau and his background.
I can't tell you that much more about Treau because we're a secret startup like all the startups in San Francisco. Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you, Debbie. It's great to be here. I'm Kipp Bradford. I am a biomedical engineer who's turned into a thermodynamicist. I am probably the only biomedical engineer who's also a licensed universal HVAC technician. My work has crossed academia as well as industry, and I've had a number of startups, done research into thermal systems and architecture, and I'm really interested in how we use energy to make people comfortable and how we can use less energy to make people more comfortable. My involvement with Nation of Makers came, as Dorothy mentioned, I'm one of the founding board members. That involvement came through interactions with the former White House, where a lot of this work started and was brought to the country to help promote innovation, help promote competitiveness in STEM, and particularly bringing a lot of the excitement and impact of the maker movement into industry, academia, and more formalized places where it can grow and thrive.
Awesome. So to frame our discussion today, why don't we start with, I guess, the big question, the foundational question. Why is diversity so important when we're talking about energy innovation and technology innovation? Maybe Kipp, I'll hand it over to you. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, why is diversity so important when we're talking about this?
I think that's a great question. to start the answer with a lot of research that's shown that diversity is important regardless of the sector that you're in, the sector that you are in. Diversity has impacts on the bottom lines of companies. Companies that have greater diversity are shown to have greater revenue, greater profitability, greater impact on the markets that they serve. And a lot of the research around this has demonstrated that diverse workforces produce diverse interactions with markets, diverse intake of ideas, and greater competitiveness because there's a broader pool of thought and perspectives to draw from when trying to innovate. And I think it sounds so obvious when you say it, but a lot of companies just don't embody those practices, and a lot of organizations don't embody those practices that would allow them to be more competitive, more responsive to the environments and markets that they're working within. So I think just framing that as a foundation, that diversity brings profitability, you know, if nothing else, it brings competitiveness. It also brings better environments for people to work in. Diverse companies have better employee retention, better reported employee happiness. And I think it's hard to overlook the quantitative impact of bringing diversity into organizations. And it's good for society. I think we don't want to be living in a world where people just don't have access to jobs and opportunities because of their gender, their race, or other factors that might have in the past made it difficult for people to have access.
I mean, I think also I'll also chime in and say, you know, diversity also reduces risk, right? So I think if you think about it and you think about problem solving, right? You have one, you know, each person comes with their own perspective. And so the more perspectives you have, the more problems you're able to identify and the more solutions you're able to identify to those problems. And so each person comes with their own vantage point. So the more diversity of perspectives, the less risk you have with a particular innovation because you're able to kind of problem solve all the different problems that could go wrong with that innovation. You're able to see different sides of things. You're able to see different use cases. And you know, I think there's been some, you know, in the news, there've been some really stellar examples of failures of a lack of diversity. A few years back, there was a soap dispenser at one of the Silicon Valley companies that wasn't detecting an individual with a darker colored skin. And that wasn't like an intentionally racist, you know, sort of, you know, machine. It was just that perhaps nobody with that skin tone was at the testing table, right? And so, you know, that was a failure that could have been, you know, overcome. Another example is, you know, when our all-female spacewalk just happened not so long ago, they searched for a while. They had to create new spacesuits because the people at the table, again, were generally men. And it's not that the men didn't think about women or don't think highly of women, they just weren't thinking about the differences in size. And so I think when you bring different people to the table, you really see, you know, a lot, you know, more perspectives coming, a lot more innovation happening. And sometimes innovation comes from, you know, the most interesting places. And so, you know, you never know where that's going to be. And I think by creating an environment where you're encouraging more perspectives to come to the table, more perspectives to be heard and listened to, you have a much better chance of more innovation in any sector.
Awesome. Both great answers. And I love your examples, Dorothy. It's so true. And yeah, that was great. When it comes to energy, what do you guys think, like, how will diversity really play a role in helping us be a little bit more innovative with our energy technologies? Do you have thoughts there?
So I think, I mean, I can chime in a story. You know, I think we think diversity, we immediately think sometimes race and ethnicity, but I think it's also, again, diversity of perspective. And that does come with individuals from different backgrounds, different cultures. But when we say culture too, it's not always racial or ethnic. So a great example that comes from our very own Solar Prize Challenge that we support comes from an artist who actually got to the final level in the last round round of the Solar Prize Challenge. His name is Adam Windsor and his company is Asoleo, and you know Adam quite well. And he's an artist, and he came in, he was, just an artist that worked at a local makerspace, and his idea for solar was, solar panels aren't terribly attractive, and why can't they be more attractive? And people would love to have them on their houses if they were more attractive. And so as an artist, he had no background in energy and being involved and bringing his perspective to the Solar Prize Challenge. And he was a little nervous at first. We had to really encourage him, please enter, please enter. And he got through, and then through the support of NREL and all of the other connectors within the Solar Prize Challenge, he got all the way to the final round or final level of the last round of the Solar Prize. And his company is doing well. He's very excited, still interested in staying in solar. And I just think it's a great example of someone with a very different perspective, doing something that hadn't been done before. And the folks on the energy side that were working with him have had great things to say as well. Like, we didn't really think about this. This is such a great idea, and we're really excited to continue to work with him. So I think that's the first example that comes to mind. But I think, again, you never know where innovation is going to come from. And I think, even as it relates to energy, you really want to invite the most diverse, perspectives, because even though it may seem like a strange idea or just something that's off the wall, or just, gosh, someone must have done this before because it seems like something super easy, that other perspective just comes in.
Yeah. I think I'll throw out something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is how we frame certain problems in the energy sector. One of the classic examples of that is one of the areas that I focus on, thermal comfort. Go into any building and you look at how many people are uncomfortable because the standards that were built that determine how much energy we put into a building and the temperature that we create inside buildings, those standards are all based around a very narrowly defined model of thermal comfort that's been extracted from research onto research into a very small subset of people who don't have a diversity of body temperatures and comfort levels, or regions that they're from. So we've institutionalized the core temperatures and comfort levels of a couple hundred people into the building standards that are global, that tell us how much energy we have to dump into buildings. And as a result, most people inside buildings are uncomfortable. If you look at the data from organizations like ASHRAE that collect pretty substantial amounts of data into energy usage and comfort. We've done a poor job over the last 100 years in making people comfortable because our sample size is so small. And I think that's looking at diversity a slightly different way, understanding that everybody's different, everybody brings different interactions with the space, and think about how much energy we could save if we all had operable windows that let us control the ventilation in our own space, natural ventilation, less air conditioning, less heating. You have higher comfort levels and you have less energy usage when we start to reduce the homogeneity of how we treat a building and how we treat the occupants of a building, and how we design for that. And as we start to think about that diversity and design towards it, I think it makes a big impact on specifically the usage of energy in buildings, but a lot of other areas I think are very similar.
Awesome. Great examples, both of you, really. Let's talk a little bit more about the Nation Makers specifically. What are you all doing to really kind of bring in more diverse communities and help the underrepresented communities as well? Like, how are you bringing those folks into the Nation of Makers and trying to expand innovation in general because of that?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what we've built is an organization that really supports all organizations, and for our core mission, and Kipp can also speak to this as someone else who's obviously co-founded this organization. It's been central to our ethos. So our vision really is really building a society where everyone has access to the tools and technologies, the experiences, and the knowledge to make anything. And we really want to create a thriving community of practice that involves everyone. So from day one, diversity, equity, inclusion, those were all really important to our core mission. And so we've been very intentionally inclusive. And actually that was the theme of our first annual conference of our entire community, was intentional inclusion. Like, how do we make a specific effort to include different communities, to make sure that different types of making are represented, that innovators, wherever they're found, feel supported in the work that they're doing. And so we do that in a lot of different ways, beyond just building this community and sharing resources and advocating for makers. We really do a lot of the work that we do through partnerships. We're partnered up with everyone from, tribal colleges like Navajo Tech University, the HBCU community, the historically Black colleges and university community. The American Association for the Advancement of Sciences has a huge HBCU maker initiative that we're grateful to be partnered with. We're on a National Science Foundation grant, an NSF Includes grant, which is really looking specifically at inclusion and broadening participation in science and STEM and making with some other organizations, Fab Foundation, Citizen Schools, Digital Promise, and Fab Learn. And so, we're trying to do this really intentional work of how do we, create this community of practice? Who are all the stakeholders? Who are the community organizations? Who are the community knowledge knowers that are out there? And how do we engage communities? And we don't, think that we know everything. I think one of the things, that's sort of a quick thing I just want to say, when people are thinking about how do I engage communities, what work can I do? A lot of it is not necessarily you yourself can do everything. A lot of it is through those partnerships with those community organizations that are already doing the work, right? And the idea is that, again, if you believe that innovation is found everywhere, how do you partner with those organizations and say, can we put forth this opportunity to your community? Can we engage your community in the building of this larger community of practice? And what are we missing? So we want you not just to come to the table, but also to be a participant in creating the table, right? And creating that community of practice. And so we've been really trying to do that. And really, even as we've done the work with the Department of Energy, we've been reaching back out to those communities, sending messages, encouraging the communities to participate. We know that historically there have been some communities that may not have seen, for example, energy in a very favorable way due to some, systemic issues that have happened and some unfortunate other events that have happened in the world. And so we're trying to make sure that we're doing our best to still communicate all the wonderful ways that people can be innovators in the energy sector, and that really this is for everyone, and that it's important to everyone, right? So understanding how we can create more innovation, energy will help us live a more sustainable life, right? So for our planet, for our future, that's important. And so we try to do our best to communicate that.
Awesome.
A lot of outreach takes place.
Yes, a lot.
A lot of outreach nationwide, making sure, and I think that's a very important aspect of Dorothy's work that I, as a board member, it's very important to emphasize that a lot of work goes into making sure that we're connected to the broadest number of communities in the country. That's of the utmost importance because it makes sure that we, again, live by our own morals and bring in as much ideas, as much community, as much connectivity in the network that we're trying to create. And it wouldn't happen without Dorothy, but it also requires just a lot of contribution from a lot of the participants, the organizations that we work with. And we can see the results.
That's great. I was just going to mention that I've just seen it firsthand, honestly, with the American Made Challenges. You know, we have this network that we've created. So it's the American Made Network, right? And we want a bunch of folks in that network that are ready and able to help our team succeed and move forward. And I think when somebody might think about what does that network normally look like, you know, it's full of incubators and accelerators and some prototyping facilities and some investors here and there. But a makerspace community is, in my opinion, pretty unique and different. And so it's been just really, really refreshing to have you guys be part of our network, because I do think you are bringing in a kind of a whole new, different group that normally wouldn't be thinking about specifically solar, right? There's a lot of folks that are out there in the maker spaces doing wonderful, interesting work, but they might not be working in solar. And I think your example of Osoleo is a perfect one to, you know, how an artist can just kind of like jump in and make a real change for the better for the solar industry. So I've really enjoyed working with you guys in the American Made Challenges, and I look forward to keeping that going.
Likewise.
Yeah, so let's see. Oh, we have a question, it looks like, from the audience. So let me go there and see what this says. So what kind of outreach do you find most effective?
In terms of, okay, so let's see. Well, I think for us, we're sort of a little bit of a meta organization. And so I think, you know, a lot of our outreach efforts really are, you know, with other sort of meta organizations. And so we've done a lot of, I will say, we've done a lot of community events. And one thing we were all sort of chatting about before we got on this is that, you know, in some ways, Zoom is, you know, I know you guys are probably sick of the online, you know, conferences and everything else, hopefully not too much, but you know, the one great thing about them is they actually give you a huge opportunity to diversify your base, right? So anyone that you're trying to appeal to, that you're trying to talk to, you now can get right into their living room, right? You're broadcast right into their living room. That doesn't normally happen. Normally someone has to get on a flight. We may have to offset, you know, costs for someone to participate in something. It makes it just much more challenging. And so I found that having community dialogues, we've had a number of different sort of community events and meetups. We've been toying around with, you know, a few new platforms that are sort of social platforms to bring people together to have conversations, have been really, really useful in getting a diversity of people to come to things. I think also when you do those types of events, partnering again with an organization that already exists in the community that you're trying to appeal to. And so, you know, that can be, you know, and some people shy away from faith-based organizations, but faith-based organizations are excellent, you know, venues to have a specific community audience. So if you're trying to recruit, for example, an African-American community, you know, finding that trusted African-American community church can be really, really important in getting sort of a trust relationship started, or finding an incubator that is already working with the African-American community or working with another community. Partnering with organizations, if you're interested in, for example, reaching the Latinx community, partnering with organizations that already, you know, allow for translation services or already provide translation services. That really helps in terms of making sure that what you're trying to convey is actually able to reach the individuals in a language that they feel comfortable speaking, and that allows them to freely express their ideas. While lots of technical terms are not translatable, like they actually are the same word, there's a few things that aren't, and those things will really muck it up with innovation and conversations around innovation. So sometimes we found, you know, talking to individuals and talking to organizations that already do that type of work, we're able to have those types of conversations. A lot of conversations, you really can't shortcut the human aspect. And I think although online is not exactly the same as in person, there is something wonderful about video. There is something wonderful about being able to instantly talk with somebody. And I think that those are really, really helpful for us, and, you know, have been really great. And again, those partnership opportunities.
Awesome. We do have another question from the audience, so let me go there. So for the organizations that you partner with, how closely do you look for diversity? So I guess the basic question is, how important is actual diversity in an entity or company that you're looking to partner with?
I'm going to let Dorothy answer that question in detail, but I want to start with saying it's important. It's important at the level for our organization, within our organization, at the board of directors on down. And right now, the on down part is fairly minimal, but we have a diverse board. We have had conversations recently about what diversity looks like in some of the organizations that we work with. I think one of the other things that we have to also recognize is that, as Dorothy was saying, diversity looks like different things in different places. So diversity, when we talk about maker spaces and technology, might mean ensuring that we have organizations that represent, say, farming communities, and maybe that organization is you know, completely white, or does not represent racial diversity, but represents economic diversity, represents geographic diversity, and brings perspectives that other organizations in our network might not have. And I think that's that is also different than the idea of inclusivity and making sure that those organizations promote diversity to the extent that it's available to them. Like I wouldn't expect an organization in a community that's, say, 95% of a single race to have 50-50 racial diversity within their organization. I think that's unrealistic. But do they have policies that are inclusive and welcoming? Do they have practices that reflect best practices in terms of making sure that they provide safe spaces for people to work and interact, regardless of the backgrounds of those people? I think that's the two aspects of looking at what kind of organizations we work with. One is that we want to make sure we have good representation nationwide. And the other is that we want to make sure that those organizations that we work with have policies and practices in place that provide those safe spaces, regardless of people's backgrounds, et cetera.
Yeah, and I just want to echo, I mean, I think, Kipp, you answered it right on the nail, hit the nail on the head with that answer. I think, we do try to look at sort of everything. And so I think, it's a holistic picture of who you are, what your organization is, and what your organization's mission is. But what we want to see is that you've actually paid attention to the idea of diversity, inclusion, and equity, and in a real way, not a performative, not a, I just made this one statement and, but I'm not putting anything behind it. Have you considered, when you look at, the roster of individuals in your organization, who's on your board, who's being asked to participate in things? We really try to challenge people, and we challenge ourselves too, because I will say the maker community, the mainstream maker community, does have a particular image, and that image, unfortunately, does not look like Kipp nor myself, right? And so I think that's something that we've been actively working on, is how do we continue to bring that to the forefront? How do we continue to have those conversations? And so I think a lot of the work we're doing also is around creating toolkits for maker organizations and organizations that are next to the maker movement. So we have a lot of resources on our website now around race and inclusion, being anti-racist, resources to get started, to get educated, ways that people can get engaged. A number of our maker spaces have taken upon themselves to identify facilitators, and we're working with them to kind of scale up some of the workshops around how to be anti-racist in a particular maker context. And so what we're really looking for when we look for partners are people that are like-minded, that are already, we understand you're not necessarily going to be perfect. And to Kipp's point, diversity looks different in very different ways. One of our maker spaces actually is in a very rural area. And I remember I met the executive director, and she said, I want to say, we're trying to work on diversity, but our town is like 90% white. And she said, so we don't have very many African Americans. I feel kind of weird going up to the 3 people I know and saying, you must join our maker space so we can be more diverse. And I said, well, you should tell them about your maker space, because I think it's great. But, that's not what we're asking you you to do, what we're asking you to do is really think about other ways. And she said, well, really for us, the community divider is really around socioeconomic status. And so she said, here's all the programs we're doing to try to encourage people who can't afford our monthly membership to participate. And here's some other programs we're doing with, kids that are that are under the farms level, that are able to come, to our space for free. And here's some other programs that we're doing. And like, is that diversity? It's absolutely, so really it's your own context, and really that intentionality that Kipp spoke to, that's, not performative, that really is intentional to look at, the culture of your organization, and how you can, make it the fullest organization it possibly can be, and reflective of the community that it serves and that it works with.
Awesome. Great answers, you guys. Great, really. Okay, I know that our session is, we're running short on time, but I do want to put out one more question to you all about how someone can get involved with the Nation of Makers or some of these really innovative programs that we've talked about. So I just want to throw that out there. What's your recommendation for getting someone involved if they're interested?
There's lots of ways. So if you're an energy innovator, I really do encourage you to go to the American Made Challenge. Debbie did not pay me just to say this. Go to the American Made Challenges website, which is americanmadechallenges.org, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of challenges in all different sectors of energy. So whether you're into solar, or whether you're into geothermal or water, or whatever your type of energy, your favorite type of energy is, there's a challenge for you. I really am super excited to be a part of these challenges, because they really have embraced true innovation wherever it's found. And that's really exciting to be a part of. And then for us, if you ever want to reach out, we're at nationofmakers.us. That's our website, www.nationofmakers.us. And you can always reach out to me. My name is Dorothy, Dorothy, and it's Dorothy at nationofmakers.us. You can get to Kipp at nationofmakers.us, Kipp. And, I think either of us would be happy to talk to you about the work that we're doing and to share with you. I'd be delighted to partner with more innovators, more organizations that are looking to find maker innovations, and to work with maker organizations to further energy innovation or innovation in any sector. I think that that's pretty much it. I will put in a plug for Debbie to say that if you are a solar innovator, the next round, we're in round 4 of the solar prize. The applications are due October 8th, which is coming up, but the application is actually not that difficult. It's like a really short video. It's really exciting and fun. And so you still have time to get your great energy innovation in for the Solar Prize Challenge round 4 by October 8th.
Awesome. Thanks, Dorothy.
Kipp, did I miss anything? Is there any other ways to reach us?
We have a convening yearly, and I think that's something that I have to remind everyone of. And that's a great way to participate and interact. Hopefully we'll be in person next year. That would be fantastic. If we're virtual again, then we are. But I think that's probably one of the easiest points of interaction. And then reaching us through your local organizations like Makerspaces, or directly, as Dorothy said, through the website.
Yes, and that convening is called NOMCON, N-O-M-C-O-N, and it's found at nomcon, N-O-M-C-O-N.org. And even though it sounds like a foodie conference, it's not. It's our annual convening of all of our maker leaders, and anyone who's in a sector that touches upon makers is invited to attend. That's a leader. And so, as Kipp said, we actually hopefully will be having an announcement soon about where it'll be next year. So we're very much hoping that it'll be in person.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Dorothy and Kipp. You guys were wonderful panelists, and I think you just had really great answers to all the questions. And I really enjoyed this topic of diversity. I feel like we need to talk about this more and more. And there's so many, as you mentioned, Dorothy, lots of virtual conferences going on now. And I think the topic of diversity is important across the board, not just for energy innovation. But I really, really appreciate you guys being here with us today. And I really appreciate Z Prime for hosting. So at this point, I guess I'll turn it back over to Aaron Hardick.